In this video, I'll show you how to set up Autodesk Inventor for the very first time. I'm at my Windows desktop here, and I'm just going to click on my Autodesk Inventor Professional icon. Just double click on that, and that will launch Inventor. Now, I'm using 2017 here, but it's very similar to other packages or other previous versions of Inventor. When Inventor opens, you'll have several options, and the first thing we want to do, because this is the first time we've had Inventor open, is to go up here to the upper left where there's a tab that says Tools and click on Tools. Next, go over to the left and click on the Application Options icon. You'll see a bunch of tabs show up inside the dialog box, and select the Sketch tab. Now, what we want to look at on this one is just setting up a few things that we know to be helpful whenever you're making your first models in Inventor. And they've changed things a little bit. Right here there's a button called Settings. Go ahead and pick on Settings, and that opens up some different options that we have here. And so you can see the things that are checked. These are your default checks, like display constraints on creation. That may not mean anything to you yet, but it's okay to have that on. Show constraints for selected objects, you can have that on. Excuse me. One that you definitely want to have on, though, is this check that says Edit Dimension when created, because later when you start to add features to parts, the sizes and locations of features are driven by dimensions, and we want to be able to enter those dimensions right away while we're making our parts. There's another tab here called Inference that we can check some things. These are actually the ones that were already checked, so I'm just going to leave those alone. There's a tab here called Relax Mode that allows us to relax certain constraints. I'm just going to leave that one alone for now. Primarily, I was interested in making sure that Edit Dimension when created was checked. I'm going to select OK. Spline Fit method, I'm going to stick with just the standard way. And again, we're not going to get into that. We just know that that's what we want. There's some boxes down here. We need to look at auto project edges during curve creation. We're going to have that checked. We also want to look at sketch plane on sketch creation and edit. Auto project part origin on sketch create. Point alignment is another one. And so these already may be checked when you open up your first go round with Inventor. Now up here under the display, I think most experienced users, they do not show grid lines or minor grid lines, but they will show the major axes, and by that I mean your X and Y axes. Another thing, you want to make sure that heads-up display is checked, because this is the tool that gives you a readout next to your icon that prompts you for what's next and that sort of thing, similar to the way AutoCAD does that. Alright, when we're finished with that tab, remember that's the Sketch tab, we're going to choose on the Part tab. And when we start a new part, we can sketch on the XY plane, the YZ plane, the XZ plane, or no new sketch, in which case you'll have to choose a plane to sketch on. I think it's probably better for beginners to go ahead and check this sketch on the XY plane, because you've been used to drawing on the XY plane if you've ever used AutoCAD. So let's go ahead and set that. And let's see, there's a couple of things that were checked as default checks. I'm okay with those. Enable 3D grips, let's leave this stuff. I don't think I see anything else on this we need to change. And the next tab is the Colors tab, which is right up here. We're going to select on Colors. Now, the default setting for the colors on the screen, at least on mine, came up as winter night. What I like to do, though, is set it to high contrast. So I'm going to click on high contrast, and what that does, it sets the background to black, and I think that makes it a little bit easier to see what's going on your screen. You can choose, there's one called Presentation, which gives you a white background. I always set it to presentation if I'm going to do screen captures to print, because I don't want to print a black background if I'm doing screen captures and putting those into a PowerPoint or something like that. But for day-to-day use, I like to set this to high contrast. And at that point, those are the only ones we're going to change right now, so we're just going to go ahead and pick OK. Alright, this brings us back to our initial screen. Now, the way the workflow usually happens in Inventor is that we create a part, and a part is generally some sort of 3D model. An assembly is a group of those parts put together. A drawing is when we actually draw different views of the parts that we made. We may put dimensions on those. And presentations can be everything from animations to just exploded assemblies where we pull it apart. But we almost always start by making a part. So I'm just going to click on the part option here, and that's going to open up a new session, and I'm actually in a part file. Now, part file, the extension of this is a .ipt, unlike with AutoCAD where you might have a .dwg. An Inventor part is an IPT. Now, I want to point something out to you. I have the x-axis and I have the y-axis showing here. So where they come together, that would be my 0, 0 point. Over here on the left-hand side, though, we have an area called the browser, and unlike AutoCAD, you're going to actually use this browser. You're going to see it's very important to you, especially as we get into drawing things. Now, I also want to come over here and look in the upper right corner at what we call the view cube, and on the view cube you'll see a little house-shaped symbol, which is actually the home. If I click on that with my left button and my mouse, it throws me into an isometric view. And I can even see my UCS icon down here and see that positive X runs this way and positive Y runs up and positive Z runs out in this direction. So I'll be creating a sketch on the XY plane, and I'll be extruding it along the Z axis to create a 3D object. Now there's a couple of things that I think you'll find helpful over here, and so I'm going to go over to my browser, and you see there's a word here that says origin, and there's a little triangle, and if you left click on the triangle next to the word origin, it will open up and show you, as well as you move your mouse along it, a YZ plane, an XZ plane, XY plane, which is the plane that is our current plane that we would be able to draw on. We can also just turn on an X-axis, a Y-axis, a Z-axis, and a center point. So here's what I recommend doing. There's a tool up here that says project geometry, and what you want to do is come up here and pick on the bottom half of it, and then just pick project geometry, and then come over here to the browser and project the geometry of the YZ plane and project the geometry of the XZ plane, and then press escape. Now you can see there's two green lines that have been added, and what those are, it's the geometry, which is actually the edge view of the YZ and the XZ planes, have been projected onto my XY plane here. So the profiles have been projected. Now there's a good thing about this, because now I can actually use those geometries that I have right here to dimension to. I'll give you an example. I'm going to go back to my view cube, and I'm going to pick on the side that says front, which is going to give me a normal view again to my XY plane. I'm going to draw a rectangle. I'm going to pick on the rectangle tool, and I'm just going to pick a point and just move out here into space and pick again. I'm not going to define that to any particular size. Now I'm going to go to my dimension tool, which is located right here, and by picking on dimension tool I can pick on the green line right here, pick here, and then pick on the edge of my rectangle, and it actually will bring up a dimension. And if I pick on that and I type 0 and press enter, it will pull my rectangle back over and align it to the plane that I had lit up right here. And so this was one of those planes that I projected onto here. Now I'm going to go back to the dimension tool. I'm going to pick on the bottom edge of my rectangle and pick right here, and it gives me another dimension. I'm just going to pick and place that somewhere, and where it says for the dimension value, just type 0 and press enter. And now I'm going to go back and go to that home view so you can kind of see what's happening here. So the bottom and the left edge of that rectangle are now aligned to where my YZ and my XZ planes were projected onto my XY plane. Now, once you look right down here in the lower right-hand corner, it says there are 2 dimensions needed. And what it's telling me is that to fully constrain that rectangle that I created, I need 2 more dimensions. And one of the dimensions is the length along this axis, and the other is the length along this axis. The dimensions that are taken care of now are the one that defines where the bottom edge is located and where the left-hand edge is located, because I've already put dimensions on there setting those to 0. If I come back to the dimension tool and I just pick on the top edge and just move my cursor up and pick again, I can see it's telling me that that's defaulting to about 0.665. That's because I didn't draw this any particular distance. If I type 1 right there and then there's a green check and just pick on that, it will update and stretch that to a distance of 1. If I pick, now I'm still in the dimension command, so if I just come and pick on the side over here and move out in this direction, and where it gives me the option to enter a dimension there, I'm going to type 0.5 and press enter. And now to get out of my dimension tool, I just press escape and I'm completely out of it now. And look down here, it tells me that my rectangle is fully constrained. And when it's fully constrained, it will turn purple like that. Okay, so now that I have that constrained, what I'm ready to do is finish this sketch and extrude that rectangle to turn it into a 3D object. Even while I'm in the sketch, all I need to do is type E. And when I type E, it puts me into the extrude option. Now you can see that it's already given me an extrusion, and it's defaulted to 1 inch, and it's coming out along a positive z-axis. But you see this little arrow? This is similar to the push-pull tool in AutoCAD. If I pick on that and hold down with my mouse and drag it, I can actually drag it in the negative z-axis, or I can pick it again and I can drag it in this direction, the positive z-axis. But I also have this extrude little dialog box up here that's minimized, but there's a down arrow right here. If I pick on that, under where it says extents right here, if I highlight in there, if I type 2, I'm going to scroll out just a little bit, it will automatically set that extrusion length to 2. Now, if you look at these icons right here, you can see that it tells me direction 1 is coming in the positive Z. If I choose the second option, it extrudes 2 into the negative Z. And I have one called a symmetric. If I pick on symmetric, what it does is it starts at my XY plane, which is right here, and it extrudes half of the extrusion distance in the negative Z and half in the positive Z. So I have 1 inch of extrusion on either side relative to my XY plane. But here's another one that's really neat. It's called an asymmetric extrusion. If I choose this, I'm given the option for 2 distances here. And so in this direction, I can type 1, for example. So it goes from my XY plane, it comes 1. And for the second extrusion, I can click in this box here and type 0.5, for example. And now it only extrudes that in a 0.5 distance. So I can have a direction 1 extrusion, I can have a direction 2 extrusion, I can have a symmetric extrusion, or I can have an asymmetric extrusion. I'm just going to go back and go to, let's just use the symmetric one. So, and now I want to change, see, it's my value here is at 1. I'm going to set that back to 2. So it has 1 inch on either side, and then pick OK. Alright, so I have my first Inventor model done, and all it is a rectangle that has been extruded in 2 directions.